What if your partner's love was slowly erasing your entire identity without you even noticing? You knew all along, didn't you? About the scholarship, how Emily switched the recommendation letters? Sarah's fork clattered against her plate, the sound slicing through the low hum of the dining room's antique clock. Steam rose from the half-eaten roast, its rosemary scent now cloying and heavy, clinging to the back of throats like unspoken accusations. The tablecloth, starched white and pristine, bore faint wine stains from earlier toasts that had felt genuine just hours ago, now mocking the fragile peace. Emily's hand froze mid-reach for the salt cellar, her knuckles paling around the glass shaker. She forced a smile, the kind she'd perfected for family photos, but it cracked at the edges, brittle under the weight of exposure.
Sarah, what are you talking about? That's not… Jason leaned forward, his chair scraping the hardwood floor with a groan that echoed too loudly in the confined space. His eyes, usually soft with that boyish plea for approval, narrowed into slits of raw hurt. Wait, switched them? As in, you made sure I didn't get into Yale? Because of what? Your jealousy over my debate win last year? The words hung there, not heavy but sharp, like shards of glass scattered across the linen. Sarah's cheeks flushed, her fingers twisting the napkin in her lap until it bunched into a damp knot. She hadn't meant to say it, not like this, not when she'd promised herself to smooth over the cracks, keep the facade intact. But the wine had loosened her tongue, and the pressure of their glares had pushed the truth out, raw and unrelenting. I overheard you on the phone with Mom, Emily, last spring. You said it was for the best, that Jason needed to learn humility. I thought we'd moved past it. Emily's laugh came out brittle, a hollow echo against the wainscoted walls lined with framed family portraits, smiling faces, frozen in moments of contrived bliss. She set the shaker down with deliberate care, the crystals inside rattling like distant thunder. Perfect daughter. That's what she was supposed to be. The one who held them together, not the one who unraveled at the seams. It was a mistake, Jason. A stupid, impulsive thing. I was scared you'd outshine us all. Leave me in the dust like always. But I fixed it later, didn't I? We're here, aren't we? Family. Jason shoved his plate away, the silverware jangling in protest. The candlelight flickered across his face, casting shadows that deepened the lines of exhaustion around his mouth. Validation. That's all he'd ever chased, scraping for scraps of pride from parents who praised Emily's straight A's, while glossing over his late nights building that app prototype. Now it twisted into something poisonous, seeping into every corner of his resolve. Fixed it. You stole my chance, Em. Made me doubt everything, and you… He turned to Sarah, voice dropping to a venomous whisper. You sat on it for months? Playing peacemaker while letting this rot us from inside? Sarah reached out, her palm hovering over the table's edge, desperate to bridge the widening chasm. But her hand trembled back, curling into a fist. Manipulation had always been her quiet weapon, whispering diversions, shifting blame to keep the peace. But tonight it backfired, leaving her exposed in the crossfire. The air thickened with the metallic tang of tension, undercut by the faint, acrid whiff of overcooked potatoes forgotten on the warmer, their bitterness mirroring the souring mood. Emily's gaze darted between them, her chest tightening with the familiar knot of abandonment's shadow. Please, let's not do this. We're better than this. Jason, you're the star here. Always have been. I couldn't bear to lose you to it. But Jason's silence stretched, a void that swallowed her words whole. The clock ticked on, each second amplifying the fracture, the unease coiling like smoke through the room, choking out any hope of repair. Sarah stared at her plate, the food congealing into grayish lumps, mirroring the curdled trust between them. No one moved to clear the table. The betrayal lingered, a guest uninvited yet impossible to ignore. The clatter echoed into silence, the air thickening with betrayal's bitter aftertaste. Each breath labored under the dining room's oppressive gloom. Hours blurred into a melancholic haze, suspicion coiling like smoke through their veins, unraveling fragile bonds. Desperate to reclaim what was lost, they drifted toward the shelf, fingers brushing dust from the leather-bound album,
its pages promising illusions of unity amid the gathering shadows of doubt. "It's not like that, Jason. Emily didn't mean for it to go this far." Sarah's voice cracked on the last word, her hands fluttering toward the photo album on the sideboard, as if the leather-bound relic could stitch the fraying edges of the evening back together. The dining room chandelier cast fractured light across the polished oak table, glinting off the congealed gravy pooling around the roast's remnants. Jason leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, his gaze fixed on Emily, who sat rigid, fingers twisting the napkin in her lap into a knotted mess of linen threads. "Come on," Sarah pressed, sliding the album free with a soft thud that echoed like a reluctant confession. "Remember this one? The beach trip, when we were kids. You two built that sandcastle taller than Dad." She flipped open the cover, pages whispering against each other, releasing a faint, musty scent of aged paper and faded ink. Photographs spilled into view, sun-bleached faces grinning under wide-brimmed hats, waves blurring at the edges like forgotten promises, their joy now tainted by the room's heavy shadows. Emily forced a smile, thin and brittle, her eyes darting to Jason's unyielding stare. She leaned forward, pointing at a snapshot of them knee-deep in the surf, Jason hoisting a plastic shovel triumphantly. "Yeah, and you buried me up to my neck. Said I'd make the best mermaid." Her laugh emerged hollow, scraping against the room's stifling quiet, but Jason didn't join in. His resentment simmered beneath the surface, a shadow coiling tighter with each forced reminiscence. Why dredge up these lies now? The scholarship betrayal gnawed at him, twisting every shared memory into evidence of her endless overshadowing. Sarah turned the page, her mediator's instinct kicking in, smoothing the air between them with feigned nostalgia. "Look here, your first piano recital, Emily. Jason, you were so proud," clapping louder than anyone. The photo captured Emily at 10, fingers poised over keys, while Jason stood in the background, his boyish face alight with something that now felt like illusion. Sarah's words aimed for harmony, but her pulse quickened, caught in the crossfire of their glares. She manipulated the moment subtly, steering away from the accusation's raw edge, yet suspicion laced her every suggestion. Had she known all along? Jason's mind raced, parsing her eagerness as complicity. He snatched the album closer, flipping roughly to a later page. A family portrait from last Christmas, all of them posed in front of the tree, Emily's arm slung casually around his shoulders. "Perfect family, right? Until you decided my future wasn't worth your perfection." His voice dropped low, contemplative, each word weighted by the pressure of unmet expectations. The room pressed in, the clock's tick marking seconds like accusations. The rosemary's cloying residue now soured by doubt, hanging thick in the dim air. Emily's insecurity flared, her drive to reclaim the ideal sibling crumbling under his scrutiny. "I was scared, okay? Scared you'd leave us behind with that scholarship. What if they all saw how much better you were?" Jealousy bled through her admission, unintended, sharpening the fracture. Her fear of abandonment clawed at her chest, but Jason only saw calculation, the shadow of her envy confirming every suspicion. Sarah reached across, her hand hovering over the photo, desperate to bridge the widening chasm. "We can fix this. Just remember who we are." But the album lay open between them, a graveyard of curated moments, each image now tainted, whispers of betrayal echoing in the oppressive hush. Jason pushed it away, the pages fluttering shut like a door slamming on trust, leaving only the melancholic weight of what they'd lost, settling like dust in the flickering light. Her fingers trembled as they grazed the album's worn leather, drawing it into the dim glow of the chandelier. The air thickened, pressing against Sarah's chest like an unspoken accusation, the congealed gravy a forgotten stain on the unraveling night. Hesitant, she parted the pages, each creak echoing the fracture in her voice, shadows pooling in the margins where betrayals lurked unseen. A chill seeped through her, fear coiling tight as forgotten corners yielded to her touch. "Why did you keep this from us, Emily?" Jason's voice sliced through the dim glow of the chandelier, His fingers splayed across the yellowed envelope that had slipped from between the album's pages, like a forgotten accusation. The paper crackled under his touch, edges frayed from years tucked away. The ink on the visible corner faded, but legible. Emily's looping script, dated 5 years back. Emily froze mid-reach for the album, her palm hovering inches from the leather cover. The dining room shadows clung to the walls, the remnants of dinner, a half-eaten slice of pie congealing on porcelain, suddenly irrelevant against this unearthed relic. She swallowed, throat working visibly, her eyes darting to Sarah for rescue. But Sarah sat rigid, knuckles whitening around her napkin, her mediator's calm fracturing like thin ice underfoot. It was nothing, Emily stammered, her voice a thin thread pulling taut. She leaned forward, trying to snatch the envelope, but Jason held it aloft, his arm a barrier forged in the heat of his resentment. Perfect daughter, always the golden one. Her awards lined the mantel, while his report cards yellowed in a drawer. This letter, though, promised to tip the scales. Jason tore it open with a deliberate rip, the sound echoing off the oak panels like a verdict. He scanned the lines, his face draining of color, breath catching in shallow bursts. Nothing? You wrote to Mom and Dad about my application, the one I begged you to keep quiet. You told them I faked the recommendation, that I was unreliable. And you signed it like it was concern, like you were protecting the family. The words hung, poisoning the air with their weight. Emily's cheeks flushed, not with shame, but a defensive blaze, her jealousy uncoiling like a serpent in her gut. She'd always overshadowed him, hadn't she? His failures were her triumphs by default. But now, exposed, the fear clawed at her. Abandonment, the family's love slipping through her fingers like sand. You were going to ruin everything. That scholarship was a lie, Jason. I did it for us, for the harmony you never see. Sarah's hands trembled as she rose, chair scraping against the floorboards with a low groan. Peace. She needed peace. But the manipulation stirred within her, a shadow urging her to twist this back into mediation. Stop, both of you. This was years ago. We can— No, Sarah. Jason's interruption was sharp, his eyes wild with the terror of confirmation. Not just one betrayal, but a pattern. The letter detailed more. Emily's whispers to their father about Jason's instability, planting doubts that cost him internships, friendships within the family circle. Validation. He'd craved it. But here it crumbled, exposing his resentment as a mirror to her jealousy. His chest heaved, the oppressive weight of expectations pressing down, fear blooming cold in his veins. What if this was all he'd ever be? The failure they already half believed. Emily recoiled, tears welling, her drive to shine now a desperate grasp at perfection. I was scared you'd drag us down. Please, don't hate me. But the plea dissolved into silence, the album forgotten on the table, its pages a graveyard of curated memories now tainted. Sarah reached out, voice softening to a coax. We talked this through. No more secrets. Yet inside, conflict raged, caught between them, her fear of the rift widening into irreparable chasms. The room closed in, the chandelier's light fracturing further, casting their faces in jagged relief as trust shattered, piece by brittle piece, leaving only the echo of fear in its wake. The air thickened with unspoken resentments, the chandelier's dim flicker casting elongated shadows that clawed at the walls like accusations left unsaid. Emily's fingers trembled as she stared at the frayed envelope, betrayal coiling in her gut like a slow poison. Hours dragged in oppressive silence, mistrust festering between them, until the weight of hidden truths became unbearable, drawing the siblings inexorably toward a reckoning with their buried deceptions. Emily snatched the envelope from Jason's grasp, her nails scraping the frayed edges as she clutched it to her chest. The paper whispered against her blouse, a brittle shield against his glare. In the suffocating hush of the living room, the chandelier's light fractured across the walls, casting jagged shadows that clawed at the faded wallpaper. You think this is some big secret I hoarded like a thief? Emily's voice cracked, sharp and defensive, her eyes darting between Jason's flushed face and Sarah's wide, pleading stare.
She waved the envelope like a flag of surrender, but her grip tightened, knuckles whitening. Inside, the letter from their father's old firm burned in her mind. Details of Jason's overlooked scholarship, the one she'd forgotten to mention during family dinners. Her jealousy festering like an untreated wound. Jason leaned forward, his chair scraping the hardwood floor with a low groan, elbows slamming onto the table. Forgotten? You buried it, Em. Right alongside all the times you played the golden child while I choked on the scraps. His words spilled out, laced with years of swallowed pride, the pressure of their parents' ghost weighing on his shoulders. He could almost feel the weight of expectations crushing him, the fear of being the failure sibling gnawing deeper. Sarah hovered at the table's edge, her hands twisting the hem of her sweater, threads pulling loose under her anxious fingers. Sarah stepped in, voice soft but insistent, a mediator's plea wrapped in silk. Please, let's not do this. We can talk it out, figure out what it means without... But her words faltered as Emily rounded on her, the envelope crumpling slightly in her fist. Talk it out? Like you always do, Sarah? Smoothing everything over so no one sees the rot underneath? Emily's laugh was bitter, hollow, echoing off the room's stale air, thick with the scent of dust and old leather from the family albums scattered nearby. She paced now, her footsteps muffled by the threadbare rug, each one a pulse of her insecurity, desperate to be the perfect one, yet terrified they'd see through her, abandon her to the silence she'd always dreaded. You manipulate us all, don't you? Whispering little lies to keep the peace? Like when you told Mom Jason was just tired after he bombed that interview. Anything to avoid the fight. Jason's eyes narrowed, resentment igniting like a slow fuse. He shoved back from the table, standing abruptly, his shadow looming over the flickering light. And you, Sarah? Always the peacemaker, but really just dodging the mess you helped make. You let her overshadow me for years, feeding her ego while I drowned. His chest heaved, the words unleashing a torrent he'd bottled since their father's death. The validation he craved slipping further away with every accusation. The room pressed in, walls seeming to lean closer, the air heavy with the metallic tang of unspoken betrayals. Sarah's face crumpled, her mediation cracking under the assault. She pressed a hand to her mouth, stifling a gasp, but her eyes flashed with hidden spite, the shadow of her own manipulations surfacing. I was trying to hold us together. You both push, and now look, tearing at each other like animals over scraps. Her voice rose, trembling, the fear of being trapped in their rivalry twisting her features into something raw, unmasked. Emily halted her pacing, the envelope slipping to the floor with a soft thud, its contents spilling slightly. A photograph of Jason's triumphant smile at graduation, one she'd envied in secret. She met his gaze, the jealousy she'd buried surging forth, mingling with the ache of potential loss. You were always the star, Jason, the one they praised. I had to fight for every scrap of approval, and you resent me for it? The question hung, contemplative in its venom, as the siblings stood frozen, the oppressive weight of their lies fracturing the fragile bonds, resentment coiling tighter around their hearts. Her chest heaved with the envelope's weight, betrayal's venom seeping through the paper's creases, poisoning the air between them. The living room's oppressive silence stretched into hours, shadows coiling tighter around her like forgotten regrets. Rage simmered into a hollow grief, each fractured memory a contemplative dirge in her mind. As dawn's pallid light clawed through the curtains, the finality settled. Irreversible, a chasm widening beyond repair. Jason's duffel bag thudded against the worn hardwood floor, before the zipper's rasp cut through the living room's stifling hush. Threads of faded blue nylon snagged on the floorboards, pulling loose like the fraying bonds between them. Emily's knuckles whitened around the crumpled envelope, her eyes darting from the bag to his rigid back, the paper's edges now jagged from her earlier snatch. The chandelier above swayed faintly, its crystals tinkling a discordant melody that mocked their unraveling. You can't just walk out, Sarah's voice emerged, thin and frayed, her hands twisting the hem of her sweater,
as if to wring peace from the fabric. She stepped forward, positioning herself between Jason and the hallway's dim archway, her mediator's instinct kicking in like a reflex she couldn't suppress. But beneath it, the shadow stirred, her urge to twist the moment, to sideline the storm before it swallowed them all. "Jason, please, we're family. We talk this out." He turned slowly, his face a mask of hollowed cheeks and shadowed eyes, the weight of unspoken failures pressing down like an invisible yoke. Acceptance, that elusive ghost he'd chased through every accolade overshadowed by Emily's effortless shine, slipped further away now, resentment boiling into something sharper. "Talk? That's all we've ever done, Sarah. Pretend the poison isn't seeping in." His gaze flicked to Emily, who stood frozen, the envelope a talisman against her chest. Her perfect poise cracked, jealousy flickered in her eyes, not for his leaving, but for the freedom it promised, the abandonment she feared mirroring her own buried dread of being left unloved. Emily's breath hitched, a small sound swallowed by the room's oppressive weight. The faint scent of mothballs from the curtains, the sticky residue of old spills underfoot. "You're doing this because of me, aren't you?" Her words tumbled out, laced with accusation, her drive to embody the flawless sibling fracturing under the pressure. Insecurity clawed at her, the fear of losing them all making her voice waver. "You always have. Jealous because I—" "Jealous?" Jason's laugh scraped raw, echoing off the peeling wallpaper. He snatched up the bag, slinging it over his shoulder, with a force that sent a loose bulb in the chandelier flickering. The light dimmed, casting their faces in stark relief, betrayal's cold hue painting the lines of their shared history. "You stole the light, Em. Every time. Dad's pride, Mom's nods, and now this?" He jabbed a finger toward the envelope. Its contents, a letter of faded dreams, perhaps a will or a long-lost inheritance, mocking his every effort. Overwhelmed, the expectations crushed him. Failure loomed, vast and inevitable. "I'm done chasing shadows." Sarah reached for his arm, her touch light, manipulative in its gentleness, aiming to pull him back into the fragile harmony she craved. But her fear bloomed, conflict's sharp edge cutting too close, trapping her in the crossfire. "Jason, think about what this means. Leaving. It's forever." Her voice cracked, revealing the stress etching deeper lines around her eyes. He shook her off, the motion final, a severance. The resentment toward Emily surged, a shadow eclipsing any lingering hope. "It already is." With that, he strode toward the door, the floor creaking under his boots like a final grieving sigh from the house itself. Emily's sob escaped then, raw and unfiltered, her body folding as the perfect facade shattered. Sarah stood rooted, hands empty, the manipulation failing against the tide of outburst. Jason crossed the threshold without a backward glance, the door clicking shut behind him. A soft sound that echoed like a eulogy. In the sudden void, grief settled heavy, coating the air with the metallic tang of loss. The envelope slipped from Emily's fingers, fluttering to the floor like a discarded confession, its whispers of what might have been now silence forever. The door slammed shut with a finality that echoed through the hollow room, severing the last thread of their shared history. Dust motes swirled in the dim light, settling like unspoken regrets on the frayed carpet. Emily's grip on the envelope slackened, the jagged paper slipping to the floor as a wave of disillusionment crashed over her and her siblings. Eyes hollow, shoulders slumped in the oppressive weight of betrayal. In that suspended moment, the fracture deepened, bonds unraveling into irreparable shadows. The door's slam shattered the fragile hush, its echo ricocheting off the walls like a final verdict. Sarah flinched, her teacup slipping from her grasp to fracture on the coffee table, porcelain shards scattering across the scarred wood like brittle accusations. Steam curled from the spilled tea, staining the envelope Emily still clutched, the paper now blooming with dark, irregular blotches that mirrored the chaos blooming inside them. Emily's breath hitched, sharp and involuntary, as she stared at the door where Jason had vanished. The crumpled envelope, his rejection letter from the firm, the one she'd waved like a trophy of her own unspoken superiority, fluttered to the floor. He just left. she whispered, voice cracking not with sorrow, but with the raw edge of something poisoned. Her fingers, still pale from gripping too tight, hovered over the shards, as if piecing them back might mend what she'd helped unravel. Perfect Emily, always the golden child, now exposed in her jealousy, the way she'd savored his stumbles while polishing her own resume to a blinding sheen. Sarah knelt swiftly, scooping fragments with hands that trembled not from the spill, but from the web of half-truths she'd spun to keep them all tethered. "Emily, wait, let's not—" Her words trailed, mediation dissolving into the oppressive weight of the room, where dust motes danced in the dim lamplight like indifferent witnesses. She wanted harmony, that illusion of family unbroken, but her manipulations, whispered encouragements to Emily about Jason's laziness, subtle digs to Jason about Emily's fragility, now clawed back at her. Caught in the middle, yes, but by her own design, and the fear of it all spilling out choked her like the acrid scent of cooling tea. "Why does he always do this?" Emily burst out, rising abruptly, her chair scraping against the floorboards with a grating screech that filled the void Jason left. Tears welled, but they were laced with fury, her insecurity twisting into blame. "I try so hard, for all of us, and he just walks away, like I'm the enemy?" She paced, heels clicking sharply, each step a punctuation to her unraveling poise. The perfect daughter, craving approval, yet her shadow loomed, the quiet resentment of Jason's rare triumphs, the ones she'd diminished in family dinners with sighs and eye rolls, ensuring she stayed the unchallenged star. Sarah stood, fragments clutched in her palm, cutting into her skin with tiny, insistent pricks. Blood welled, a thin red line she ignored, her drive for peace fracturing under the pressure. "He's overwhelmed, Em. The expectations, they're crushing him." But even as she spoke, doubt seeped in, her words a bandage over wounds she'd helped inflict. Jason's resentment toward Emily, that simmering undercurrent she'd ignored, now erupted in his exit, a betrayal that bound them all. She glanced at the door, half expecting him to return, but the silence mocked her, thick and unyielding. Emily whirled, eyes flashing with the disillusionment that had been building like fault lines. "Crushing him. What about me? I bend over backward to keep us together, and he resents me for it?" Her voice rose, an outburst that echoed the grievances they'd buried. Childhood praises unevenly doled, opportunities snatched, affections rationed. The room pressed in, walls seeming to lean with the weight of unspoken accusations, the air thick with the metallic tang of Sarah's blood, and the faint, lingering cologne Jason had worn, now a ghost. Sarah dropped the shards, letting them clatter anew. No more piecing together. The crisis settled, heavy as regret. Their bonds, frayed by jealousy and manipulation, stretched to breaking. Despair coiled in her chest, cold and final. Jason gone, and with him, any illusion of repair. Emily sank onto the sofa, sobs muffled into her hands, the perfect facade crumbling. In that moment, they saw it clearly. The family they'd clung to was a mirage, shattered irreparably, leaving only the hollow echo of what might have been. 3 days crawled by in a suffocating haze, the shattered teacup untouched on the table, like a frozen emblem of fracture. Shadows of betrayal clung to the house, thickening the air with unspoken resentments that seeped into every corner. Sarah moved through the days like a ghost, her unease a constant weight pressing on her chest, until the remaining siblings converged in the living room once more. The facilitator's arrival stirred the oppressive stillness, drawing them into a circle where buried angers simmered just beneath the surface, waiting to be unearthed. "Why are we even here?" Sarah's mind recoiled as the facilitator's voice droned on, soft and insistent, like sandpaper against raw skin. 3 days had clawed by since the door's slam, since her teacup had exploded into accusations on the table. Shards she'd swept up herself, alone in the dim kitchen light, while Emily and Jason avoided each other's eyes. Now, in this same living room, the air thickened with the faint, acrid scent of yesterday's coffee grounds. Untouched mugs clustered on the side table like forgotten relics. The facilitator, a wiry woman named Dr. Ellis, with wire-rimmed glasses and a clipboard balanced on her knee,
leaned forward from the armchair that had once been Father's favorite. "Let's start with the anger," Dr. Ellis said, her pen poised. "It's been building. Who wants to go first?" Emily shifted on the sagging couch, her fingers twisting the hem of her sweater, a soft blue knit that matched the facade she'd worn for years. Perfect daughter, always smoothing edges. But inside, the jealousy gnawed, sharp as the porcelain edges she'd helped clean. I feel like we've all been pretending," she murmured, voice barely rising above the tick of the mantel clock. Her eyes flicked to Jason, then away. Like Jason's success is this shining thing, and I'm just chasing shadows. Jason's laugh came out brittle, forced, scraping against the walls. He slouched deeper into the armchair opposite, his broad shoulders hunched under the weight of expectations he'd never asked for. Validation, that's all he craved. Yet here it twisted into resentment, coiling tight around his chest. "Pretending? You're the one who always gets the praise, Em. The golden child. I bust my ass at that job, and what? Dad's ghost still hovers, judging me for not being you." His words hung, jagged, pulling at the threads of their shared history. Sarah's pulse quickened, caught in the crossfire as always. She sat between them on the couch, knees pressed together, the mediator's role chafing like an ill-fitted glove. Peace. That was her drive, her shield against the chaos that terrified her. But manipulation simmered beneath, a shadow she couldn't quite banish. The way she'd always nudged conversations away from the brink, rewriting truths to keep the harmony intact. "Guys, please," she interjected, her voice a fragile bridge. "This therapy is supposed to help us heal after everything. The eldest leaving. It wasn't about us fighting." Dr. Ellis nodded, unperturbed. "But it is about the betrayal you feel. Speak it out. The pain doesn't stay buried." Betrayal. The word landed like a stone in still water, rippling unease through the room. Emily's face crumpled first, the perfect mask fracturing. "You think I don't see it, Jason? How you resent me? I've been killing myself to keep us together, to make sure we're not abandoned like Mom left us." Tears welled, hot and unbidden, her fear of unloved isolation spilling forth. She turned to Sarah. "And you always side with him, don't you? Manipulating the peace so you don't have to choose." Jason's eyes widened, the pressure cracking his composure. "Side with me? You're the one who overshadowed everything. I wanted Dad's approval, not this rivalry you forced on us." His voice broke, vulnerability raw, the overwhelmed state flooding out in a rush of resentment he'd hidden too long. Sarah froze, the conflict she'd dreaded enveloping her like smoke. Her hands clenched in her lap, nails biting into palms. "I didn't. I was just trying to hold us." But the words faltered, her shadow exposed. The subtle twists, the omissions to dodge the storm. Unease coiled tighter, a suffocating vine, as the facilitator watched silently, the room pulsing with the unsaid pains they'd unearthed. The clock ticked on, indifferent, while the siblings' gazes locked, not in unity, but in the hollow ache of truths laid bare. 3 days later, the session room pressed in heavier, its stale air thick with unspoken fractures. Sarah's gaze lingered on the empty chairs, her thoughts a churning undercurrent of doubt, the facilitator's cadence now a hollow echo against her fraying resolve. Shadows of that shattered teacup lingered in her periphery, sharpening the edges of trust into something brittle, suspect. Each sibling's silence a veiled accusation, waiting to unravel the fragile threads of their shared history. That's when Sarah knew. The fragile truce they'd stitched together over breakfast had unraveled, thread by brittle thread, in this sterile room where the facilitator's notepad scratched like accusations against bone. The circle of mismatched chairs, hers sagging under her weight, Jason's rigid as his spine, closed in, the faint hum of the air conditioner underscoring every pause. Emily sat across, knees drawn up, her fingers twisting the hem of her sweater until the wool frayed. Eyes fixed on a scuff mark on the carpet. "I've carried this long enough," Emily said, voice cracking like thin ice underfoot. The words hung, pulling the air taut. Jason shifted, his knee bumping the coffee table,
sending a ripple through the lukewarm water glasses. Sarah's pulse quickened. She'd orchestrated this session, nudging them here with promises of closure. But now the weight pressed back, her own exhaustion mirroring the shadows under her siblings' eyes. "What now, Em?" Jason's tone sliced low, laced with the resentment he'd nursed since their father's will divided the estate. His share meager, hers inexplicably larger. He leaned forward, elbows on thighs, the scent of his unwashed shirt mingling with the room's stale coffee. "Another story about how Mom always picked you? We've heard it. Save the drama." Emily's gaze lifted, sharp as shattered glass. "It's not a story. It's what she did to us. To you." She swallowed, the facilitator murmuring encouragement from the corner. But Emily barreled on, her frustration spilling like ink from a tipped bottle. "Remember the summer after Dad left? When we were kids, and you got that art award? The one everyone said would make you famous? Mom took me aside that night, in the garage, while you were upstairs gloating. She said you were just lucky, that real talent was rare, and if I worked harder, I'd eclipse you. But then she gave me that old sketchbook of yours, the one you'd hidden, and told me to copy your style. Beat him at his own game," she whispered, like it was a weapon. Jason froze, color draining from his face, the room's fluorescent buzz amplifying the silence. Sarah's mind reeled, flashes of that summer resurfaced. Emily's sudden obsession with drawing, the way Jason's confidence had withered overnight, awards gathering dust. Had Mom planted those seeds of rivalry? Sarah's own manipulations flickered in her thoughts. She'd always smoothed the edges, redirecting arguments to keep peace. But this twisted their shared history into something poisoned. "You copied me?" Jason's voice emerged hoarse, suspicion etching lines around his mouth. He stared at Emily, not with the old overshadowing anger, but a dawning doubt that clawed deeper. Had her successes been stolen echoes all along? Emily met his eyes, her jealousy cracking open to reveal the fear beneath. The terror of being unloved if she didn't fight for her place. "She made me, to prove I wasn't the failure she feared I'd be. But it wasn't just copying. She burned your originals after, Jason. Said they'd hold you back." The revelation landed like a stone in still water, ripples distorting their reflections. Sarah's breath caught. She'd mediated their fights for years, fearing the crossfire. But now, suspicion bloomed in her chest. Had Emily's resentment been Mom's echo, or something more deliberate? Jason's hands clenched, his drive to carve his own path fracturing against this unearthed betrayal, isolation deepening as he questioned every accolade he'd chased. Emily shrank back, vulnerable in her confession, the mask of sibling loyalty splintering to expose the raw wounds they'd all ignored. The facilitator cleared her throat, but no one moved. In that suspended moment, the room's oppression thickened, each sibling's gaze a probe into the other's guarded truths, the past refracting through lenses of doubt. The air grew thicker, each breath a labored echo of fractured trust, as shadows lengthened across the circle's unforgiving geometry. Sarah's pulse thrummed with the weight of unspoken betrayals, her gaze drifting to the middle sibling's fidgeting hands, knotted in quiet desperation. Fear coiled in the room's stale corners, a melancholic shroud pressing down, priming the fragile silence for the inevitable fracture. The scratch of the facilitator's pen pierced the hush, dragging Sarah back to that Christmas Eve years ago. The eldest brother's voice on the phone, tinny and distant, promising he'd make it home before the turkey cooled, only to leave silence in his wake, the receiver heavy in her palm like a stone. She blinked, the therapy room snapping into focus, the vinyl chairs creaking under shifting weight, the air thick with the faint chemical tang of institutional cleaner that clung to everything. Jason slouched across from her, arms crossed like barriers, his knuckles pale against the dark fabric of his sleeves. Emily fidgeted beside him, her nails digging crescents into her thigh, eyes fixed on the faded carpet, as if it held secrets worth unraveling. "We can't keep circling this void," Sarah said, her voice threading through the hum of the air conditioner, steady at first, then fraying. Exhaustion pulled at her edges. She'd woven so many fragile pieces between them, only for them to snap like overtaxed wires. But this time, the drive clawed deeper, to unearth the rot beneath their shared smiles, to force some honest fracture toward real quiet. I've been thinking, what if I call Alex, just to talk? He's family. We owe him that much before we let this fracture swallow us whole. The words hung, exposed. Jason's head snapped up, his gaze sharpening like a blade unsheathed. Call him? Now? His laugh barked out, short and hollow, but beneath it lurked the isolation he'd nursed for months, overshadowed by Emily's relentless climb, his own path reduced to footnotes in their parents' proud recountings. Success on his terms? It felt like chasing shadows in a room without light. You think dialing up the golden boy will fix this? He'll hang up again, Sarah, like always, and we'll be left picking up the pieces he never bothered with. Emily's breath hitched, a sharp intake that cut the air. Her fingers stilled, then curled tighter, jealousy coiling in her chest like smoke. Jason's quiet accolades, the ones that came without her grind, had always gnawed at her, but this? Reaching for Alex, the one who'd abandoned them all to his glittering exile? It stirred the fear she'd buried under layers of resentment. Unloved, discarded, her identity dissolving in the wake of their fractured bond. You're delusional, she spat, voice low and venomous, eyes flashing to Sarah with a betrayal that tasted metallic on her tongue. He doesn't want us, never has. You reach out and he'll confirm it. Slam the door on whatever's left of this mess. I won't let you drag us through that humiliation again. Sarah recoiled, the facilitator's pen pausing mid-note. But the words had already breached the dam. Her own fear surged, caught between their barbs, manipulating the space to dodge the storm. Yet here it raged anyway. The room pressed in, walls unyielding, the air conditioner's drone a relentless murmur echoing the pulse in her ears. Jason leaned forward, his anger cracking open to reveal the raw underbelly. You always do this, Sarah. Play peacemaker while we bleed. What if he rejects you? What if it proves we're nothing to him, to each other? Emily's eyes glistened, not with tears but with the terror of erasure, her drive to claim her worth fracturing against the wall of potential loss. Don't, she whispered, the plea twisting into accusation. Please, it'll break us for good. The circle tightened, invisible threads of loyalty snapping one by one, exposing the hollow ache beneath. Sarah's hand hovered over her phone in her lap, the screen dark as the doubts flooding her mind. Fear bloomed in the silence, cold, insidious, whispering that this outreach might not mend, but shatter what little remained. Years blurred in the facilitator's shadowed room, but the stone-heavy silence of that Christmas Eve clung to Sarah like damp rot, festering into a melancholic ache. Betrayal's bitter aftertaste soured every family gathering, the eldest's absence a gaping wound that no apology could stitch. In the oppressive stillness of the old house, regret twisted her thoughts into knots, whispers of what-ifs, fragile dreams of reunion. Midnight's weight pressed down, urging her toward the door, the line between hope and fracture blurring in her impulsive haze. The receiver's plastic edge dug into Sarah's palm like a forgotten bruise, yanking her from the echo of that long-ago Christmas into the stifling now. Emily sat across the scarred oak table, her nails scraping faint lines into the wood as she leaned forward, eyes narrowed to slits of green. You always played the peacemaker, Sarah. But let's be honest. It was just another way to keep us chained here, wasn't it? While Jason and I tore each other apart over scraps of approval. Jason shifted in his chair, the leather creaking under his weight like a stifled protest. His fingers drummed a slow, uneven rhythm on his knee, each tap pulling at the threads of his frayed jeans. Scraps? That's rich coming from you, Em. You've been lording your independence over me since we were kids, jetting off to those art shows, pretending your sketches meant more than my dead-end job. But I see it now. You're jealous. Always have been. Of what? My failures? Or the fact that Dad actually noticed when I tried? The words hung between them, sharp as shattered glass, slicing through the dim lamplight that pooled like spilled ink on the table. Sarah's throat tightened, the air thick with the scent of dust motes stirred from years of buried grudges. She had orchestrated this gathering, this forced reckoning in the family home, convinced that peeling back the layers would mend what the eldest brother's absence had rent. But now, with Emily's resentment laid bare, her voice cracking on the admission of fearing abandonment, of watching Jason's small triumphs eclipse her own desperate grasp for worth, it only amplified the ache. Jason's anger spilled out next, raw and jagged, his isolation a fortress built from the shadow of unmet expectations, resenting Emily for stealing the spotlight, even as he envied her escape. "I didn't manipulate anything," Sarah whispered, her voice a fragile thread in the oppressive quiet. Exhaustion clawed at her edges, the constant pull of their rivalry leaving her frayed, caught in the crossfire she dreaded most. Yet beneath it, her own shadow twisted. The subtle nudges, the averted confrontations, all to dodge the storm. "I just wanted us whole. For him to come back. For all of us." Emily's laugh came hollow, a sound like wind through cracked panes. "Whole? After he promised and vanished? You're still chasing ghosts, Sarah, just like always." The truth landed like a blow, exposing the fears that had fueled their betrayals. The jealousy that poisoned Emily's drive for self, the resentment that isolated Jason from redefining his path, the manipulations Sarah wielded to preserve a fragile peace. Regret bloomed in Sarah's chest, cold and insistent, as the weight of it all pressed down. How many holidays had she glossed over the hurt, believing her interventions could stitch the family back? Impulsiveness surged then, a reckless spark in the melancholic haze. She rose abruptly, chair legs scraping the floorboards with a guttural rasp. Her coat hung on the hook by the door, wool heavy with the chill of the hallway beyond. "I'm done waiting," she said, voice steady despite the tremor in her hands as she shrugged it on. The fabric whispered against her skin, carrying the faint must of cedar from the closet. "He's out there. Reconciliation isn't dead. It's just buried under all this. I'm going to find him." Jason's drumming stopped. "Sarah, wait!" But she was already moving, the door's latch clicking open with a decisive snap. Cool air rushed in, tinged with the metallic bite of distant traffic, as she stepped into the night. Behind her, Emily's sharp intake of breath cut the silence, Jason's chair scraping back in futile pursuit. The divide widened with each step down the porch, the home's glow receding like a betrayed promise. Regret trailed her, a shadow longer than the street lamps, whispering of the deeper fractures she had just carved. The words sliced through the air. Emily's accusation a fresh wound that twisted Sarah's gut with simmering rage. Betrayal coiled in her chest like rusted wire, the weight of unspoken histories pressing down on the dim kitchen. Hours blurred into a haze of restless pacing, the scarred table a mocking anchor. Unable to endure the suffocating silence any longer, Sarah seized her coat and ventured into the shadowed streets, her steps drawn inexorably toward the forgotten corners of their childhood, where ghosts waited to unravel her fragile sense of self. The echo of laughter that once filled these walls, now swallowed by dust. Sarah's grip on the receiver slackened, the line dead before she'd even pressed it to her ear. Emily's words lingered like smoke, curling through the dim kitchen where sunlight clawed at the edges of faded curtains. But Jason wasn't there, not his shadow slouched against the counter, not the scrape of his boots on the linoleum. He'd stormed off earlier, muttering about needing air, leaving the two of them to pick at the scabs of their shared history. Emily pushed back from the table, chair legs groaning against the floor. "I'm done sitting here. If we're digging up ghosts, let's find the real ones." Her voice cracked, sharp as splintered glass, but she moved anyway, toward the narrow hallway that branched off like a vein from the house's heart. Sarah followed, feet heavy on the warped boards, each step pulling her deeper into the reluctance that had always defined her. Mediating, yes, but never truly stepping in. The search began haphazardly. Drawers yanked open in the sitting room, their contents spilling like forgotten confessions. Yellowed photos, a tarnished locket, the brittle spine of a book Jason used to read aloud on stormy nights. Emily rifled faster, her breaths coming in short, frustrated bursts,
as if speed could outrun the jealousy gnawing at her core. She was the youngest, always chasing the glow of their approvals. Jason's easy triumphs in school debates, Sarah's quiet orchestrations of family harmony that left her, Emily, feeling like an afterthought. Up the creaking stairs they went, the air thickening with the scent of mildew and neglect. Emily shoved open the door to the attic, the one they'd sealed after Dad's death, its hinges protesting like a withheld scream. Dust motes danced in the sliver of light from a cracked window, illuminating the chaos within. The old play fort of blankets and crates, sagging now. The trunk where they'd hidden treasures, its lid warped and unlatched. Emily knelt, fingers trembling, not from cold, but from the fury rising as she pried it open. Inside lay the relics of betrayal. Jason's first-place ribbon from the science fair, crumpled beside Emily's unfinished drawing of the three of them as superheroes, her lines jagged, erased in fits of doubt, and tucked beneath, Sarah's journal. Pages filled with neat script detailing how she'd nudged Jason toward that win, whispering doubts into Emily's ear to keep things balanced, all to avoid the blowout she feared would shatter them. "You," Emily hissed, whipping the journal toward Sarah. It fluttered open midair, words scattering like accusations. "You played us both, told me Jason was too cocky, that he'd fail without my help shadowing him. And him, you fed his ego, made him think he was the star while I faded." Sarah's face drained, the exhaustion cracking into something raw. "I was trying to hold us together. You two were always at each other's throats, his resentment boiling because you shone brighter without even trying, your jealousy twisting everything he touched. I manipulated? Yes, because the alternative was watching you tear apart what little we had left." The door below slammed. Jason, back from wherever isolation had dragged him, his footsteps pounding up. He burst in, eyes wild, taking in the scene. Emily clutching the ribbon like a wound, Sarah backed against a beam. "What's this?" he demanded, voice a low thunder. But his gaze snagged on the journal, the truths spilling out in ink. "You overshadowed me," he spat at Emily, fists clenching empty air. "Always the golden child, and Sarah let you. Pushed me to prove myself just to scrape by. I hated you for it, every damn day." Emily surged forward, shoving the ribbon into his chest. "And I hated you for stealing the light, for making me feel like I didn't belong, like our family was yours to claim." Tears streaked her dust-smeared cheeks, but her glare burned, anger uncoiling, hot and unfiltered, exposing the fears that had festered. Abandonment for her, failure for him, endless mediation for Sarah. Jason recoiled, the ribbon crumpling in his palm, his isolation fracturing into rage. "This place, it was supposed to be ours, not this poison." He kicked at the trunk, relics scattering, the attic closing in like a shared grave. Sarah sank to the floor, the weight of her shadows crushing, as the nostalgia twisted into a blade, belonging, once a tether, now a noose of exposed hurt. Days blurred into a haze of unspoken regrets, the kitchen's dim light yielding to the oppressive twilight that seeped through cracked blinds. Sarah's heart, heavy with the youngest abandonment, twisted in longing for truths long buried. Drawn by an invisible thread of betrayal, she crossed the shadowed hallway to the eldest's room, the air thick with the ghosts of their shared deceptions, each step echoing the fractures widening between them. Outside, the neighbor's lawnmower droned on, a relentless buzz slicing through the afternoon. Inside, Sarah's breath caught, ragged against the sudden quiet of the kitchen, where the phone cord still swung like a pendulum from her loosened fingers. She hadn't heard the front door click open, but there Emily stood, shadow pooling at her feet from the hallway light. Her coat dripped faint traces of city grime onto the linoleum, subway soot perhaps, or the exhaust that clung to every hurried step home. Emily's eyes, sharp and unyielding, fixed on Sarah. But her voice emerged cracked, laced with the weight of words she'd rehearsed on the train. "You hung up on me," Emily said, not accusing, but stating it like a fact etched in stone. She shrugged off her coat, letting it crumple over the back of a chair.
the fabric whispering against wood. Or maybe you didn't. Doesn't matter. Jason's gone and done it, hasn't he? Packed up for that fellowship without a backward glance. Abandoned us both, just like that. Sarah's pulse throbbed in her temples, syncing with the distant hum outside. She turned slowly, gripping the counter's edge, the cool porcelain grounding her against the swell of exhaustion. Peace, this elusive thing she'd chased through every argument, every mediation, slipped further away. He called you too? Her words came soft, probing, but inside the old instinct stirred. Twist the narrative, deflect the storm. Yet her body betrayed her, shoulders sagging under the kitchen's dim pall. Emily laughed, a hollow sound that echoed off the peeling wallpaper, patterned with faded roses that once bloomed vibrant. She stepped closer, the scent of her perfume, something cheap and floral, bought on impulse, cutting through the stale air of boiled cabbage from last night's uneaten dinner. Called? No, texted. Needs space to figure things out, as if we're the clutter in his perfect life. And you knew, didn't you? You've been playing both sides, Sarah, telling him it's okay to chase his dreams while feeding me lines about family sticking together. The accusation landed like a blade, twisting in the quiet. Sarah's mouth opened, then closed. The revelation burned up her throat, unbidden, fueled by the frustration coiling in her chest. She wanted to deny it, to smooth the edges as always, but the weight of their shared history pressed down. The late nights whispering secrets, the alliances forged in the shadow of their parents' indifference. I didn't tell him to leave, she murmured, voice fraying. But I didn't stop him either. Remember last summer, when you pushed him out of the business idea, called his plans delusional? I backed you then. Said he was too fragile for the real world. It was easier. Kept the peace. Emily froze, her face paling under the fluorescent flicker overhead. The jealousy she'd nursed, that bitter root twisting toward Jason's quiet triumphs, his sketches turning into exhibits while hers gathered dust, now mirrored back at her. We did that? Together? Her hands clenched at her sides, nails digging crescents into palms. But her eyes softened, glistening with the ache of what they'd lost. Not just Jason's silhouette vanishing down the drive, but the illusion of solidarity, the longing for a bond untainted by their own barbs. Sarah reached out, then pulled back, the space between them yawning wider than the kitchen table strewn with unpaid bills. We were scared, she confessed, the words tumbling slow, contemplative, each one heavy with the oppression of truths long buried. I of you two tearing each other apart and dragging me under. You of him outshining you, leaving you invisible. And now? He's redefined it all without us. We're the ones left holding the pieces. Emily sank into the chair, the wood creaking under her, and for a moment, the only sound was the lawnmower's fade into silence outside. Longing hung between them, not for forgiveness, but for the family they'd imagined, whole, unfractured, before their fears had carved it hollow. The betrayal settled, a melancholic fog, revealing not just Jason's flight, but the roles they'd played in driving him there. As Emily's silhouette sharpened in the dimming light, betrayal's chill seeped into Sarah's bones, the kitchen's pendulum slowing to a halt. Hours dissolved in melancholic haze, grievances festering like wounds beneath the skin, pulling the threads of their fractured bond tighter. By evening's oppressive shroud, the third sibling crossed the threshold, his arrival a contemplative prelude to unraveling. Despair hung heavy, vulnerabilities bared in the gathering shadows, the weight of their shared past threatening to fracture everything irreparably. The kitchen, late afternoon, sun slanting low through the blinds, etching bars across the linoleum. Sarah's hand pressed flat against the countertop, steadying herself as Emily's gaze locked on the dangling phone cord. "What was that?" Emily asked, voice slicing the hush like a dull knife. Her arms crossed tight over her chest, fingers digging into her elbows, as if holding in the spill of words she'd rehearsed in the car. Before Sarah could answer, footsteps thudded from the hall. Jason, shoving through the door with his backpack slung low, keys jangling loose from his belt loop.
He froze mid-stride, eyes flicking between them, the faint scent of engine oil and fast food clinging to his shirt. "What's with the funeral vibe?" he muttered, dropping the bag by the fridge. It landed with a thud, spilling a crumpled receipt across the floor. Sarah swallowed, her throat dry as sandpaper. She'd meant to shield them, always the buffer, twisting truths just enough to keep the peace. But now, with Emily's stare boring in and Jason's scowl deepening, the lie she'd fed the caller, the one about everything being fine, soured in her gut. "It was Mom," she said finally, voice cracking on the edges. "She's not coming to the reunion. Says the drive's too much. But we all know why." Emily's laugh came sharp, bitter, echoing off the tiled walls. She uncrossed her arms, stepping closer, her sneakers squeaking faintly on the floor. Too much? Or just tired of pretending we're one big happy mess? Her eyes, red-rimmed from the mirror in the bathroom earlier, fixed on Jason. "You'd know all about that, golden boy. Always the one she calls first, the success story she brags about at Bridge Club. While I'm the punchline, the one who couldn't hack it in the city, scraping by on freelance scraps." Jason's face flushed, veins pulsing at his temples. He kicked the backpack aside, the zipper rasping open to reveal textbooks he hadn't touched in weeks. "Oh, spare me the victim act, Em. Like you haven't been lording your artistic freedom over me since we were kids. Mom's pet project, dragging us to every exhibit, every open mic where you'd recite your angsty poems. I was the one busting my ass at the garage, covered in grease, just to pay for your tuition loans you never bothered repaying." His words tumbled out, raw and jagged, each one a splinter from years of swallowed barbs. He paced, fists clenching and unclenching, the fear of being the invisible failure clawing up his chest. Sarah interjected, her voice a thin thread pulling at the fraying seams. "Stop, both of you. This isn't—" But exhaustion weighted her limbs, the constant maneuvering to dodge their barbs leaving her hollow. She'd whispered encouragements to Emily in the night, prodded Jason toward better jobs, all to sidestep the storm. Now, it broke over her. "You're tearing us apart, don't you see? The past isn't some ghost we can exorcise with shouting. Remember the treehouse? The promises we carved into the wood? We're all that's left." Emily whirled on her, betrayal flashing hot in her eyes. "Promises? You were the one who told me Jason was jealous, that I was the strong one. And you?" She jabbed a finger at Sarah. "You played us like pawns to keep your precious calm, abandoned us to your games while Mom faded away." Jason halted, breath heaving, his isolation cracking open like dry earth. "Yeah, Sarah, always the mediator, but never picking a side. What about us? What about the brother who's failing because no one sees him anymore?" He sank against the counter, shoulders slumping, the weight of unmet eyes pressing down. Silence descended, thick and suffocating, broken only by the distant hum of the lawnmower fading into dusk. Their shared glances fractured, resentment etching lines deeper than before, vulnerabilities laid.